I'm Jack English. Today we're going to look at the Scott Peterson case. I have a lot to unpack in a little time, so let's get right into it. There was strong evidence to suggest Lacey not only was alive on the morning of her disappearance, but she was alive long after Scott had left that morning. If you followed the case at all, read newspapers, shows, documentaries, we all know why you feel he is guilty, and I get it. However, if you look at what should be constituted as evidence, it may suggest something different. He may be guilty of a lot of things, but not the murder of his wife. This case was all in my backyard. At the time, I was living in Fresno, the same town as Amber Frey, and I was going into the California Highway Patrol Academy. I grew up in the Bay Area and spent a lot of time at the Berkeley Marina fishing on my uncle's boat. I also knew Modesto pretty well. The media portrayed Modesto as this quiet, little 1950s Midwestern feeling town where no one locked their doors. This is not totally accurate. Modesto's slogan is water, wealth, contentment, health. The slogan should be murder, meth, and auto theft. Modesto has a high homeless community in close proximity of the Peterson's home. There were 7 felonies that were committed within a 5-mile radius of the Peterson's residence, all within a 24-hour period of Lacey's disappearance, one in which a burglary that occurred directly across the street from the Peterson's residence. Around 6 weeks prior to Lacey's disappearance, Scott was out of town at a work convention. He was presenting himself as a single guy. He met a woman he was interested in, but she told him she was taken. She told Scott she has a good friend who is single, and she gave Scott Amber's number. Scott soon called her, and they would go on their first date. Amber jumped right away into bed with Scott and emotionally, setting herself up once again to get hurt. Not long after their first date, the friend who set up Scott and Amber found out Scott was married. She confronted Scott and told him if he didn't tell Amber he was married, she would. Now Scott is on the hot seat. He met Amber and he played the widow card. He told her he had been married and he had lost his wife, breaking down in tears. Was this a man who was plotting to murder his wife in a few weeks who didn't think this might bite him in the ass down the road? Or was he just a lying cheater who was put on the spot and came up with a lie? Something he was becoming efficient at. Cheating and lying go together like dancing partners on Broadway. On December 23rd, 2002, the day before Lacey goes missing, Scott and Lacey are seen at Scott's warehouse. An employee at the facility opened the restroom for Lacey. This is in detective notes which never made the final report. This is in the same place that Scott was hiding the quote-unquote secret boat. The same boat he told a list of friends about, a boat he had registered with the California DMV in his name. By the way, he also owned 3 boats prior to this one. This is a good example of law enforcement using media to manipulate public perception. They throw out a bone to the media, and the media eats it up. There are several examples that you could give in this case that law enforcement did that. Later in the afternoon, Scott and Lacey go to Lacey's sister's hair salon. Lacey's sister does Lacey's hair and shows her how to style her hair with a curling iron. She asked Scott if he needed a trim, and Scott declined. Scott invites Lacey's sister to come over that evening for pizza and watch Monday Night Football, and she says she already had plans. Why is Scott spontaneously committing to plans at the salon on the evening of December 23rd if he had plans to murder his wife that evening? One would think he would be too preoccupied to make those offers. They pick up a Mountain Mike's pizza and they go home to watch Monday Night Football. Scott tells law enforcement specifics of the game. 8:30 p.m., Lacey is on the phone with her mother, the last known person to speak with Lacey other than Scott. Scott says after the game, they watched the movie The Rookie and then went to bed around 11 p.m. Scott states Lacey wore his blue pajama bottoms, which law enforcement finds in the clothes hamper. On December 24th, 2002, Scott states they woke up around 7 a.m. and Lacey immediately went to eat breakfast, or she would get sick. They ate Puffins, a cereal they had purchased recently at Trader Joe's. They got ready for the day, and Scott remembers seeing Lacey in the bathroom standing on the stool styling her hair just the way her sister had shown her. He says she looked really cute. Scott and Lacey had a maid service come in the day before on the 23rd who stated the stool and curling iron were put away. Another strong piece of evidence that suggests Lacey was alive that morning. They then watch Martha Stewart's show together, and Scott describes the show. He remembers they discussed what to do with lemon meringue, which is later verified. Sometime That morning, before 9:30, Susan Medina, a neighbor of Lacey and Scott, drove by that morning and reported their vehicles were parked in the driveway. There was no garage at the residence. If Scott killed Lacey, he decided to load her body in broad daylight without the concealment of a garage or darkness. 10:08 a.m., Scott is on his cell phone somewhere between his home and his warehouse. Travel time from the home to warehouse is approximately 9 minutes, and soon is logged into his computer at his warehouse. 10:14 a.m., a neighbor finds Mackenzie on the front property and puts him back into the side yard. Is it possible Scott didn't close the side gate well and the dog got out, then Lacey went on her walk? Scott is at his work and sends some emails and researches how to assemble a mortise tool he had just purchased. The tool was found by law enforcement put together. Was Lacey's body lying there while Scott assembled the tool? Was he this nonchalant after killing his wife? Scott then heads to the Berkeley Marina with his boat. Scott is presumed to have loaded Lacey's body into a small boat with 5 concrete anchors to dispose of her body at one of the Bay Area's most populated and busiest boat docks during midday. He would have had launched his small boat sitting low in the water with his wife's body planted in the boat with an audience of people. This marina is 52 acres of water that accommodates vessels 84 feet in length. There are fishermen, people who live on the boats. The marina has a facility with storage lockers, water hookups, electrical outlets for camping, restrooms with showers, and parking. There is a full-service boatyard with an on-the-water fuel dock, a boat launch ramp, and an area for trailered boat storage. There are 3 restaurants and boat hoists. This is not an isolated area one would probably choose to dispose of a body. It was a clear day, and line of sight goes for miles. Law enforcement put out to the media that Scott didn't know what bait he used or what he was fishing for. Scott had purchased saltwater lures he forgot in his truck, which later police found in his truck. Scott stated he used freshwater lures he had. I grew up fishing in the bay. You don't really know what you're going to catch. You get your hook in the water and you could catch so many different types of fish. There are bluegill, sturgeon, salmon, sea bass, just to name off a few I remember catching. It's much different than fishing, say at a lake where you know, okay, they have bass or trout. Another example of law enforcement throwing out a bone for the media to eat up for their agenda. Back at the Peterson residence, someone at the Peterson home logged into the home computer and researched sunflower umbrellas and a woman's scarf that morning she went missing. Lacey had a sunflower tattoo on her ankle and was known to like sunflowers. Scott did not tell law enforcement about anyone being on the computer that morning because I believe he didn't know Lacey went on the computer after he left. 10:14 a.m., the next door neighbor lady arrives at home and finds Mackenzie, the Peterson's dog, with the leash on out in the front property. She puts the dog back into the side yard and closes the gate. Law enforcement and prosecution say eyewitness accounts beyond 10:14 a.m. could not have happened. The neighbor lady had receipts showing errands she ran that morning and could place herself at a definite time finding the dog. However, the mailman, who has the Peterson's home on his daily route and knows the home well, says every day when he walked to the house, the dog would bark, whether it was in the backyard or inside the house. On that day, after 10:14 a.m., sometime around 10:35, no dog barking, and he noticed the side gate was open. Is it possible while Lacey was getting ready to go on her walk, Mackenzie got out? The neighbor then finds Mackenzie and puts him into the side yard. Perhaps then Lacey went on her walk with Mackenzie? At least 12 credible witnesses see Lacey all the way to the park that morning. You can pinpoint on a map the time and location with Lacey sightings all the way to the park. A couple driving in the neighborhood see Lacey walking and struggling with the dog. These are 2 corroborating witnesses in the same car that see the same thing. A neighbor doing her dishes see Lacey from her kitchen window walking her dog. A guy who runs the same time, the same route each day, sees Lacey and Mackenzie walking the dog in the park. A woman who works at a hospital near the park goes on a smoke break. Overlooks the park with a clear vantage position. I personally know because I've been there. She says she clearly remembers seeing Lacey and Mackenzie. These witnesses all came forward not weeks or months, but the very next day to law enforcement. Law enforcement discounted the witnesses due to the neighbor who arrived back home and put Mackenzie back in the side yard at 10:14. If Lacey did in fact walk Mackenzie all the way to the park that morning, she would have arrived around the same time where the neighbor's residence across the street was being burglarized. Family and friends say Lacey was the type to stick her nose into something like that. Yet another disconcerting tip from a Lieutenant Aponte who worked in a California prison. He reported hearing a phone conversation where an inmate from Modesto indicated that a pregnant woman who had confronted burglars who were robbing the house across the street. There were also more reports that day of suspicious van and 3 men. A witness saw a van speed off in the neighborhood with clothing hanging out the side door. I'm an avid runner. I run several days a week with my dogs in parks and in the neighborhood. I have not one time seen a pregnant woman who looks like Lacey running with a dog who looks like Mackenzie. Mackenzie was a golden retriever lab mix with a distinctive white diamond marking on his chest. Please ask yourself, have you ever seen a pregnant woman who looks like Lacey with a dog that looks like Mackenzie? I have made a conscious effort when I run, just out of curiosity to see it. Do I ever see that? And I haven't. And I've been doing that for a few years. At the very least, 12 witnesses came forward that day saying they saw her walking the dog. I have heard a lot of people state so-called evidence like, what husband goes fishing on Christmas Eve with an 8-month pregnant wife? Lacey was an educated person and had her own career. She was outgoing, independent, and had lots of friends. She had spent the day before with Scott, and she had her own plans to get ready for Christmas with a Christmas brunch she was going to prepare. What constitutes as evidence for some people is a joke. In May of 2002, Evelyn Hernandez, a 24-year-old 8-month pregnant Modesto woman, goes mysteriously missing. This is the same year, just months prior to Lacey's disappearance. She had dropped her 5-year-old boy off at babysitter's and was going to do some shopping. They had found her wallet in a shopping center parking lot. She would never be seen alive again. On July 24, 2002, Hernandez's body was found floating in the Berkeley Bay, underneath the Bay Bridge. Just like Lacey, her head, hands, and feet were missing. Her boyfriend, an expecting father, who she had just found out during her pregnancy was married, he came under suspicion with law enforcement. Unlike Lacey, Hernandez's case did not receive much publicity. No warrants or arrests were ever made. Emotional thinking refers to a generalized inability to distinguish emotions and thoughts. For some, strong emotions tend to interfere with balanced and realistic thought processes that can result in a distorted view. There was a mob of people outside of the courthouse every day. The jury had to enter the same doors as everyone else that entered the courthouse. If you looked at the trial transcripts, the defense beat up the prosecution almost every day of trial. The prosecution did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt Scott was guilty. They proved he was a liar and a cheat. The prosecution found a really good day to have a good day. In the closing arguments, the prosecution presented a picture of Lacey sitting alone pregnant and a picture of Scott at a party with Amber. Lacey's mom took the stand and gave very emotional testimony where it was as if she had channeled Lacey. The jury was emotionally compromised to subjectively weigh the evidence. They knew they would be heroes with a guilty verdict. After the verdict, they gave press conferences and looked like they won the Super Bowl and relished in the admiration. Why was there no cadaver scent at the house, the truck, the warehouse, or in the boat? In the area within 1 mile radius of Lacey's home, there were 24 sightings of Lacey and Mackenzie. Within 3 mile radius, there were an additional 7. This is a total of 31 witnesses. What possible excuse did Modesto Police Department have for not investigating each one of these sightings to determine exactly what was seen by each of the witnesses? Lacey was alive that morning after Scott left. Keep a subjective mind and look at actual evidence beyond a cheating husband.
You strike me as a particularly icy and remorseless man, Mr. Dufresne. It chills my blood just to look at you. By the power vested in me by the state of Maine, I hereby order you to serve 2 life sentences back to back. 1 for each of your victims. So be it.